Between 2010 and 2014, India accounted for 15% of the world's total arms imports. We were the world's biggest weapon buyer, spending over $60 billion in 2 decades on foreign military equipments, submarines from Russia, fighter jets from France, guns from Israel, ammunition from across the globe. We spent over $2 billion every year just buying weapons from other countries. 72% of the weapons came from Russia alone. But today, India's defense exports have exploded from 686 crore rupees in 2013 to 23,622 crore in 2024.
Indian defense stocks jumped.
India's defense imports are shrinking.
Operation Sindoor destroyed terror hubs deep inside Pakistan.
We are now exporting to around 80 countries compared to just 30 previously. The Philippines, China, Armenia, Egypt, Malaysia, and Argentina are all negotiating billion-dollar deals for Indian technology. This transformation represents something much bigger: how India became an emerging global weapon exporter and how it has created a shift in global power. This is the story of the new India. Section 1. The Dependency Trap. For decades after independence, India had become trapped in a vicious cycle of defense dependency that left the nation strategically vulnerable when it needed strength the most. In the 2010s, India has held the title of being the world's longest arms importers consistently, accounting for around 15% of the global arms purchase. A staggering 72% of our weapons came from Russia alone between 2010 to 2014. We were spending billions every year just buying weapons from other countries. But India wasn't just being sold weapons, it was being deliberately denied the technology to build its own weapons. The Missile Technology Control Regime, the MTCR, was the perfect example. Created in 1987, this group of Western nationals specifically targeted countries like India, preventing us from accessing any technology that could help build indigenous defense capabilities. While these sanctions impaired India's defense projects, China took advantage and high-end defense tech continued to flow into Pakistan from China. The cryogenic engine scandal is another example. In 1991, India struck a deal with Russia for KVD-1 engines at barely 1/4 the price the Americans' company General Dynamics had quoted for inferior American engines. But then President Bill Clinton played a crucial role in denying India the technology, describing Indo-Russian deal as dangerous. And on top of that, the corruption made everything worse. In the 1980s, Sweden's Bofors company paid $600 million in bribes to sell 410 artillery guns to India at $1.4 billion. Imagine, India's biggest arms purchase deal built on bribes. When the scandal exploded globally, it paralyzed the Indian artillery procurement for 3 decades. Not just that, the Augusta Westland helicopter scandal was even bigger. 12 VVIP helicopters were ordered meant to transport India's most important leaders, including the Prime Minister, but instead 3,600 crore rupees in bribes followed through offshore bank accounts in London and Dubai. International media regularly describe India's defense sector as murky and corrupt. The world saw a country with hostile neighbors and active borders that was completely dependent on others for its security. Every defense publication wrote about India's procurement paralysis and strategic vulnerability. The geopolitical implications are insane. India faces the most hostile neighbors on earth in the form of China and Pakistan. Yet, the international system was designed to ensure India remained completely dependent on foreign suppliers who could cut off at any moment. A. Sivatunupillai, who headed the BrahMos project, describes India's struggle for indigenization as nothing short of a mini freedom struggle. The geopolitical cost was enormous. India lost diplomatic leverage because everyone knew we needed them more than they needed us. So this was a system that was designed to keep India as a permanent customer, never a competitor. The system hacked. In 2014, something fundamentally changed. The newly appointed Indian government asked a revolutionary question. What if India stopped playing by these rules entirely? And what followed was a complete system switch. The new approach was elegantly simple. Instead of buying better weapons, why not build weapons? But transforming a mindset built on decades of dependence and bribery required a strategy. the government completely rewrote how India approached defense procurement. So the old manual was 489 pages of bureaucratic confusion that essentially said import everything, ask questions later. The new rulebook became 657 pages of crystal clear priorities. Indian companies first, foreign suppliers only when absolutely necessary. More importantly, the new rule forced companies to actually manufacture in India instead of just assembling foreign parts. Made in India equipment requirements jumped from 40-50% to 50-60%. Plus, any foreign company wanting Indian defense contracts now had to share their technology and set up production facilities here in India. The real breakthrough, however, came with something called the negative import list.
The Modi government has unveiled a list of 101 defense systems which are now in the negative import list, which means they will not be imported.
Bulletproof jackets, advanced radar systems, ammunition, electronic warfare equipments, items that India had been buying from abroad for decades and suddenly had to make domestically. Over the years, more than 300 items have been added to the list. Now just think about the sheer boldness of this move. India was telling some of the world's biggest defense companies that their service were no longer needed for hundreds of products. But making these announcements were the easy part. Actually building the capabilities to replace these imports required massive infrastructure investment. And so the government went all in, creating defense manufacturing corridors in Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. 20,000 crore rupees were committed to building entire ecosystem where companies could design, test, manufacture everything from bullets to fighter jets. These were proof of intent that India was serious about becoming a manufacturing power. For decades, Indian private companies were dominated by slow-moving government companies that took years to deliver basic equipment. The new rule changed everything. Private companies could now own up to 74% of the defense ventures without even asking for permission, and 100% with government approvals. Even more importantly, 25% of the defense modernization budget was specifically reserved for the private companies. Suddenly, India's most innovative manufacturers, Tata, L&T, and hundreds of smaller firms saw defense as a massive opportunity instead of a closed door. So in 2018-19, only 54% of the defense procurement came from domestic source. By 2024-2025, that number jumped to 75%. The government was literally redirecting thousands of crores from foreign accounts to Indian companies. And the results were almost immediate. Defense production, which had been stagnant for decades, exploded from 46,429 crore in 2014-15 to 1,27,265 crore in 23-24. And that's a 174% increase in less than a decade. More importantly, the ecosystem changed completely. India suddenly had over 350 major manufacturers and 10,000 small and medium companies working in defense. Companies like Tata Advanced Systems set up India's first private aircraft assembly line. L&T went from making construction equipments to capturing nearly half the defense market share. Even smaller companies transformed themselves from making industrial parts to manufacturing precision components for missiles and aircraft. The psychological transformation was even more significant than the numbers. For the first time in generations, Indian companies started to believe that they could compete with anyone in the world, and the government began backing them up instead of automatically assuming foreign meant better. Section 3. The world takes notice. By 2020, India had built this incredible defense manufacturing ecosystem. But the big question remained: could Indian weapons actually compete internationally? Would other countries trust made in India defense equipments with their national security? The answer came from the Philippines. In 2022, the Philippines was facing serious pressure from China in the South China Sea. Beijing was building artificial islands, sending warships into Filipino waters, essentially acting like they controlled the region. The Philippines desperately needed missiles that could reach these Chinese positions, something with serious range and devastating accuracy. They had options. They could buy from America, from Europe, from any traditional defense suppliers. Instead, they chose India. 375 million rupees for BrahMos missile. The BrahMos has a 290 kilometer range and flies at 3 times the speed of sound. This is world-class technology that can neutralize ships, coastal installations, pretty much anything an aggressor might deploy. Think about what this decision meant. A country facing pressure from a superpower chose Indian missile over American or European alternatives. not because they were cheaper, but because they were more effective. The Philippines essentially said that we trust Indian technology to defend our sovereignty. Given that China and India were already locked in their own border disputes and strategic rivalry, this was double strategic. And China definitely noticed. Their carefully planned South China Sea strategy suddenly had to account for Indian missiles that could reach every artificial island they have constructed. But this was just the beginning of a global shift. In 2023, Egypt started serious negotiations for 20 Tejas fighter jets worth $1.2 billion. Malaysia followed with discussions for 18 jets worth $900 million. Argentina joined with talks for 15 jets at $750 million. The Tejas was now competing directly against South Korea FA-50, against European alternatives, against aircraft backed by decades of established reputations and winning contracts. But the most dramatic success story came from Armenia. So Armenia had been buying Russian weapons for decades, relying on Moscow for their defense needs. But then in 2020, they fought a brutal conflict with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenian forces using Soviet-era Russian equipments got absolutely devastated by Azerbaijan's forces equipped with modern Turkish and Israeli weapons. It was a complete strategic disaster. So Armenia made an unprecedented decision. They completely ditched Russian and came to India. So $1.5 billion worth of deals since 2020, Akash air defense systems for $720 million, Pinaka rocket system for $250 million, advanced artillery guns, ammunition, comprehensive defense packages. Now this was extraordinary because Armenia literally bet their national survival on Indian technology over Russian technology. Meanwhile, India's technological capabilities were making global headlines. In 2024, India successfully tested a hypersonic missile with a 1500 plus kilometer range, flying at 3 kilometers per second. And let me tell you, only a handful of countries worldwide possess this technology. The Mission Shakti anti-satellite test in 2019 destroyed a satellite 283 kilometers above the Earth, making India only the 4th country to demonstrate this capability. And the message was unmistakable. India could now defend itself not just on land, sea and air, but in space as well. And there's more to it. AI integration across 106 DRDO projects, swarm drones technology coordinating 100 drones simultaneously, the BrahMos 2 hypersonic variant in development. India isn't just catching up anymore. We are leading the innovation in multiple areas. Companies like Indo-MIM transformed from making industrial parts to becoming major defense exporters. So the entire ecosystem now has evolved from dependence to self-reliance to global competitiveness. Section 4, the new reality. All these defense exports and technological breakthrough didn't just make India money. They completely flipped how the world sees India. Remember how Russia used to supply 72% of India's weapons? By 2024, that number dropped to 36% only. The Americans noticed this immediately. The US went from barely registering on India's defense imports to becoming a major partner. They signed the ICET, Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, in May 2022, which allows collaboration on semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, space technology, and defense innovation. And in October 2020, they signed BECA, Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, which enables sharing of classified geospatial intelligence, satellite data, and real-time military information for precise targeting of missiles and drones. These are frameworks that let India and America share technology and intelligence in ways that would have been unthinkable even 10 years ago. On top of that, France became India's second largest defense partner, supplying 28% of imports by 2024. But here's the difference. Now when India talks to France, this is not as a buyer, but as a potential partner. French companies are now setting up manufacturing in India, transferring technology, creating joint ventures. Even NATO wants closer ties with India. This is strategic autonomy. India can now work with America on containing China while simultaneously buying oil from Russia. It can partner with France on submarines while maintaining ties with Iran. So the old India had to take sides, but the new India makes everyone compete for its attention. Even Operation Sindoor accelerated India's defense transformation dramatically. In May 2025, India achieved 100% accuracy in penetrating incoming missile attacks. In just 25 minutes, Indian forces struck 9 terrorist camps across Pakistan with surgical precision. BrahMos cruise missile hit the target 290 kilometers away, and within a week after the operation, Vietnam and Indonesia fast-tracked their BrahMos negotiation. Vietnam's $700 million deals moved closer to finalization, while Indonesia's $450 million discussion gained serious momentum. Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, and Indonesia all expressed interest in the Pinaka rocket system after witnessing its precision. Even Russia offered a joint production of the advanced S-500 systems after India's S-400 performed flawlessly. But the real impact has been economic. The defense sectors now employs hundreds of thousands of people in high-skilled jobs. We're talking about engineers designing missiles, technicians building fighter jets, scientists developing AI for military application. You see, these are careers that pay well and keep talent in India instead of sending them abroad. Government estimates suggest 100,000 to 120,000 skilled jobs were created from just reducing imports by 20 to 25%. The defense corridors alone have created employment for thousands more. And these kind of jobs have a multiplier effect. Each defense jobs create 3 or 4 more jobs in supporting industries. And not just that, this import substitution has saved India 1.4 lakh crore that would have otherwise gone to foreign suppliers. And that is money staying in the Indian economy, creating jobs for Indian workers, profits for Indian companies, and taxes for Indian government. So over 1,000 defense technology startups are developing everything from cybersecurity solutions to advanced materials. India has created an entire ecosystem that didn't exist 15 years ago. The defense budget itself grew to 6.81 lakh crore in 2025-26, a 9.5% increase showing government's commitment. So now let's be honest, India isn't perfect yet. There are still areas where we need foreign technology, still systems where we depend on imports. R&D investments need to keep growing, quality standards need to keep improving. Competition from the established players is intensifying as they realize India is no longer just a market but a competitor. But there is no denying that India has become a legitimate alternative to traditional suppliers, and things are just getting started. The government has set ambitious target 3 lakh crore in defense production and 50,000 crore in exports by 2029. And given the current pace of growth, these numbers seem conservative. India is developing capabilities in hypersonic, AI space system, quantum computing, technologies that will define the 21st century warfare. This isn't just about catching up anymore. In some areas, India is setting the pace, and the world is watching a new kind of transformation. China became a manufacturing power by copying Western technology, and now India is becoming a defense power by innovating indigenously while selectively partnering globally. It's a model that other developing countries are starting to study and emulate. India stopped accepting that others would always be better and started proving that we could build solutions the world requires. The India emerging today offers partnership, innovation, and solution. So countries facing security challenges increasingly look to India as a trusted partner and technological innovator. We have moved from being dependent on others' goodwill to being sought after our own expertise. But perhaps most importantly, India has proven that strategic autonomy is about having the confidence to engage with the world as equals. The defense transformation is really a reflection of a larger change happening across India. In every sector, we are seeing the same pattern, moving from dependence to self-reliance, from importing solutions to creating them, from following others to leading innovation. This is just the beginning. The India that refused to accept permanent dependence in defense is reaching out for leadership across multiple domains. And the new India is showing the world what's possible.